Hogstye.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hogsty. We are in the Memorial Day week of the off season. There's OTAs going on. It's not training camp, it's OTAs, and there's a distinction and without a difference there. But uh, Steve wants to correct me so bad right now. I can already see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is a difference, okay?
Right.
It's OTAs is not training camp. The rules of what can be done during OTAs are different than what the
Right.
rules can be done for training camp. So let's be specific and correct and say, in fact, Alex is totally wrong as normal, as usual, and it is a distinction with a difference.
Right. You're more limited on practices. I don't think any OTAs are ever allowed to be publicly viewable.
Right, and there's differences about contact and lack of contact.
Right,
and stuff.
right. You're only allowed to do 7-on-7s, for example.
So, and actually, when Alex says it's a distinction without a difference, what he really meant was that's
it's very
totally wrong.
distinct.
Believe the opposite. That's what
How are you guys doing?
It's still a bunch of guys in helmets and shorts.
Yes.
That much is true. Yes.
Well, I hope you guys have been doing well. I know it's not Happy Memorial Day, but
that's not a. I mean, people.
Yeah, we talk about it every time. Don't say that.
I will say that. If you're going to thank somebody on Memorial Day, thank a Gold Star mother. Do not thank me
or father. We'll love that too.
Gold Star parents.
Yes.
And it's definitely worth noting because I got to tell people that all the time.
Yep.
Even my mom, when she goes, "Well, thank you for your service," I'm like, "Mom, this isn't for me, but thank you anyway. Yep. I do appreciate it."
Although it is also Public Service Member Month or something like that, I think. I think that's also a thing this month as well. That they've now dedicated the whole month to those who serve.
Is that something new?
No.
Newer?
No, it's actually been around for a while, but no one counts it. Because you don't get a day off to eat hot dogs, so no one keeps track of that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. That's what America cares about. Hot dogs.
Hot dogs and good old American cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Lettuce, tomato, onion, ketchup.
You know who loves himself a hot dog covered with mustard? Is Steve.
Yes, the guy who stepped away on
mustard and sauerkraut and relish.
Yes. Yeah, we were just talking about how much you love kibasi and sauerkraut.
It's my favorite thing. I'd say I eat that 3 times a day, like for every meal. Or alternatively, I've never had it.
No.
I had to step away there for a moment, folks. That's why they were saying, yeah.
We were making up things that you like on a hot dog.
I don't even eat hot dogs, but when I ate hot dogs,
you know what the proper were just a ketchup guy.
The proper way to eat a hot dog is to have a bun and the hot dog, and that's it. That's the only way to eat a hot dog.
Just dry.
Yes.
If you
so to speak.
If you ever want to get in a good direction of good cuisine and the idea what good cuisine is, listen to Steve, do the opposite, and you'll be on the right track.
Yeah.
You'll
be healthier.
Right.
Listening
you guys
to Steve.
Don't understand.
You'll be healthier. Yes, right. That is true. Yes.
You guys don't understand that I am right. Okay? I am right. Just remember that.
When it comes to food, I got a legacy and I got a stomach to prove otherwise that you are not right on this one.
Well, and your stomach must be out to here because of what you eat.
No, that's me.
No, that'd be Alex.
Yeah. Yeah. That I will totally own up to. Although, I don't always eat unhealthy. Like today I just grilled up some chicken. Just, lemon pepper on the grill, delicious.
Yeah, but some of the food you talk about and some of the food that you make, I tell you what, man, it's not like it's bad food, but it gets my mouth watering every time you talk about most of what you make and eat it anyway.
Oh, I mean, dude, I made some delicious burgers over the weekend. I'll throw a recipe your way. I think it was an Asian style burger.
Okay.
I think you'll appreciate it.
All right.
Yes. I posted the recipe on Twitter if anyone ever follows me.
Can't you just put a piece of beef on a grill at the end? Why do everything food-wise you do is complicated, Alex?
It
Just
wasn't
put a piece of meat
complicated.
on a
It's
grill and be
called
done.
seasoning, Steve. It's
You
just.
told me once. I remember once you were saying how like you made this fancy bacon that took hours to make, and I just said, "Yeah, I microwaved 5 pieces for a minute." Remember this?
Yeah. No. Yes. When I smoked, or I made candied bacon. That's what it was. Brown sugar candied bacon.
Yeah, and this was like on game day or something. We had talked about this, and my response was, "I microwaved bacon for a minute this morning."
It was delicious. I put it on top of.
So
a
was our
burger.
bacon. It was also delicious. It was delicious microwave bacon.
In fact,
I used to microwave bacon when I was 9.
In fact, there's this restaurant right around the corner from us called the 214, and that's the name of the place. 214. They have a great burger with this bacon jam that you put
I
on
make bacon
there.
jam, or my wife does. I should say, not me.
So freaking good. Out of this world.
Bacon
That
jam's
just-
delicious.
Call your cardiologist. Have him on standby. A burger
this
with
isn't
bacon jam.
This isn't a daily diet I'm talking about. It's just
Yeah, that's a
something
good
that I
thing.
do once in a while. Trust
That's
me.
that's good. It's not a daily diet.
Yeah, I've made bacon jam here, or we've made bacon jam here twice, I think, in 15 years together. So, not a
Let's
frequent
be
thing.
honest. I mean, the city of Philadelphia is not known for health food.
No.
It's all about the grease and how many times you
It is all
reuse
about the
it.
grease.
Yeah. Philly always in the top 3 fattest cities in America, I believe. Although I think Houston's up there too, Steve.
Houston
ain't
is
a skinny
about
place.
at the top of the list. But do you see me participating in the fatness?
No. We know you lost a whole bunch of weight not long ago. So
But I want to be clear that I was never in the Alex East category.
No.
Yes, I did change everything, and that's a whole story for another day. I've told it before.
Yeah.
But I highly
Yeah.
recommend it for anybody who has a lot of discipline.
Yeah. It just sounded awful.
My diet is crazy. Yeah, my diet is an extreme
Yes, it
diet.
is. All right. We should talk about it. Speaking of making changes to your lifestyle, the Washington front office. They have started the purge of old scouts and old front office people, and they're starting to bring in some new folks. Look, let's be realistic. Average fans, you hear it's happening, you're like, good. That's all you care about, because let's be honest, the last 4 years they've not done a good job scouting and developing players. So getting rid of anybody who's been here for a while and then bringing other people in, generally a good thing. I'm going to read off the names really quickly of what's happened so far that we know about. They let go of David Whittington, who was he's going to Carolina. He was their national scout and was in Washington for 15 years. He survived 15 years of this hell as a scout. So that means somehow when Bruce got canned, he didn't get canned. I think that would even mean when Vinny got canned, he didn't get canned. He's a survivor, man.
Maybe he was a voice of reason amongst a bunch of morons.
Or he was the voice of crazy and the other morons that thought it was great.
Or
Just
maybe he
slightly
did.
less crazy.
Yeah.
Or maybe he has some very invaluable pictures.
Yeah.
That's possible too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could have been a guy who made things happen. He could have been a fixer or a bagman.
There you go.
You know?
It's not the mob.
I mean,
Bagman.
the stories
Not
made
killing
it very
people.
much sound like Dan Snyder thought it was the mob back in the day. So
I mean, maybe a football mob, but I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't literally killing. They weren't the Clintons, for God's sakes.
Well,
They weren't
no,
getting
but-
people killed.
a bagman doesn't kill anybody. He just hands you money.
But yes, but it's involved in things like murder.
Nah, it's involved in bribes and extortion. You know. I mean, look, there's also political bagmen, which for a long time was a very legal thing
For
to
example, Hunter Biden was the bagman for the Biden family.
do. Oh, I was going to actually use my great-grandfather was a literal bagman for the English government.
Let's try
Like-
not to involve your family, but okay.
Well, it was World War I for crying out loud. Like I think we're okay.
I think I like my Hunter Biden thing better. That's funny.
I can't tell. There's a story I'll tell you guys off there. I probably have told you about a bagman situation I dealt with personally, but I'm not going to tell it on air because I could get whacked.
That would be, so, yeah, there'd be a bagman involved in passing money to a hitman to whack you.
Right, exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, so
can we get back to football? We probably ought to.
Let's get back to football. All right, Chris Polian leaving for the Browns. He was here with Rivera, I believe, and now he's moving on.
Tragedy strikes.
Yes. They are hiring some good guys with good pedigrees. Let's say it that way. David Blackburn, he's coming over from the Ravens, and he's going to be the director of college scouting. Brandon Sonna, or Sosna, Sansa. I don't know how you're.
That's a character in Game of Thrones.
That's a Game of Thrones character. Yes.
Sosna. I think it's Sosna.
Sosna? I don't know what that is. Sosna.
How do you spell it?
Sosna. Sosna?
I'd say Sosna.
All right. Brandon Sosna coming over from the Lions. Lions, let's be honest, good the last few years, but kind of direct before that. But, recency bias, they've been doing pretty well. And then they're hiring Dwayne Jones as a national scout. He spent time with the Ravens, the Saints, and was with the Falcons most recently.
I mean, anybody from the Ravens is a, benefit most likely.
Yeah. And I think both Blackburn and Jones coming over from the Ravens, or at least they spent a lot of time in that organization. Right. That's a good thing.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know who any of these people are.
No,
but,
of course not.
Bringing in Ravens people, to me, strikes me as a very good idea.
Yeah, I've always thought and I get why it happens, because the timeline of the NFL is what it is. It kind of stinks when you have to keep the scouts on. When, like, a new GM comes in, he has to keep on the crappy scouts from the last guy through the draft.
Yeah, we knew what was going to happen. We knew they were going to stay till about this time.
It's just kind of annoying because you're like, these guys suck. Why are we keeping them on for another year, or another thing that matters? You know what I'm saying? Like, it'd be nice to move on faster from guys.
I mean, the reason for those who don't understand it is if you fire your scouting staff, you need to do a whole new scouting operation of the draft eligible players, and there's no time for that. They work on this all year long.
All the files disappear mysteriously, all that stuff. Or they take every bit of information they've collected to another team.
Even if they don't, you would have scouts there that may have totally opposing views of the written files, And
the other part is, of course, when you're scouting for a team, you're kind of focusing in on your needs a lot more. Like, okay, my roster needs a receiver, a corner, whatever. And, if you're just bringing guys in who they were coming from orgs that didn't need those things, they're not focused on those position groups at all.
Either that or also like the system. If you have a 3-4 defense and now you're transitioning to a 4-3, all that kind of stuff.
Also a very good point. Right. Yeah.
So we knew, they knew, everybody knew that some of these scouts were going to get fired, after.
I won't be surprised if we hear more names. This sounds like it was just the first wave.
Yeah.
I fully expect them to have 10, 15 new guys in that scouting department by a year out from now or so.
We might not even know. If it's low-level scouts,
Right. These are the top line names, the directors, the heads of departments that they're going to put out there, not, Billy, the guy who's the regional scout for the, central south part of Indiana. They're not going to do that. But, this was a move, or a couple moves. And it's a good thing overall that they're bringing guys from good orgs. So, yay. The other interesting bit of news with Washington, there's been a lot of stadium talk this week. And I don't know what started it. Like, it seemed to come out of nowhere. I know I started seeing, like, radio stations just started talking about it randomly.
Well, part of it is that bill is in the House. It came out of the House, remember? It hasn't gone to the Senate yet.
I do think that may have kicked it off a little bit, that the Senate... Well, there was the senator who said he won't support it unless they...
That was Tester from Montana.
Yeah, the guy from Montana. Yeah. So maybe that's what kind of spurned the discussion this week. But some interesting stuff came out. First off, Josh Harris... Well, and these kind of happened at the same time. Josh Harris had a quote in the media where he was asked about putting a stadium in DC, because part of the discussion is also DC and being able to afford to build a stadium in the city, which obviously, Steve, you know all about that. And Harris was saying, well, if the choice is between just a basic stadium in DC with no roof versus building in the suburbs and having a dome or a retractable roof, he's going to go with Maryland or Virginia at that point. Which is interesting. You know, I think as much as people like me who are old-fashioned and believe football should be played outside, you know, like that's just what we believe. The reality is that most stadiums are being built with retractable roofs or domes.
So the reason is that the NFL will not send a Super Bowl to a winter climate without a roof. That is the reason. Yeah, that really is the reason. You know, and so if Josh Harris thinks that they could maybe be in line for a Super Bowl at some point, then he's going to do it. And the the DMV local business people and government people would push them to make every effort to do that.
So I understand that's why, and it's also, you know, other acts as well, large stadium acts, things like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but I mean, but like Taylor Swift and Metallica could go into an open air stadium. They would just have to do the right year. But yeah, most of those stadium acts are touring during the spring and summer anyway.
Right. My big thing is I've often wondered if we would ever get a Super Bowl anyway, just because of the security logistics of this being Washington, D.C.
I mean, it's nothing I've ever came across because I live in Texas here, you know.
Right.
But there, in the security aspect of the Super Bowl is not something that came across my desk because that was kind of too tactical, you know, really for the lawyers.
Right.
But I do think it's a legitimate concern, you know, and for many reasons. You know, obviously the federal government is there. There's a lot of security stuff that goes into the federal government that people don't realize.
People don't realize how many law enforcement agencies are in this region.
Oh yeah, but even something like the 2-hour inauguration parade is a major undertaking. Undertaking. And like a Super Bowl would be worse, way worse. Than that. So I think it's a valid concern.
The number is over 80 law enforcement agencies of varying.
It surprises me that it's that high, you know, but that's a lot of agencies.
Well, so you got to remember, it's like the parks, it's all.
I know what you mean.
I'm
still surprised that it was 80. Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah, but I'm not even counting like PG County and all those places either. Yeah. This is just in the city.
But to answer your question, I mean, I don't know how much of a concern it is. It seems to me that you're probably right logically that it would be a bigger concern. It might be less of a concern if a stadium was out across the Potomac River in Virginia somewhere rather than literally in the district. You know, because most of the people who come in then would stay in Virginia somewhere, not necessarily in the district. But still, I think regardless, anywhere in the Washington, D.C. metro area there'd be a security concern, I think.
I think so too. And, you know, it does make a very tempting target for a terrorist attack, although I know that's not forefront of people's minds anymore. You know.
Yeah, but it's the forefront of people's minds that matter in the world of security and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I deal with the cybersecurity folks, which are way more laid back about things, but you know, serious security folks, I do deal with them time to time, man. They do not mess around with any of that.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
I just think in a nutshell, when you think of between the security aspect and the quote from Josh Harris like that, and you guys talked about before that RFK land site itself is kind of undersized for what you want to do for a stadium wise. And the logistics of just the area for Metro and everything else for parking on stuff would just be an absolute nightmare anyway.
And honestly, it would be horrible for a Super Bowl to be there. It'd be terrible.
I would almost think that all those factors right now, I'd almost think in the back of Josh Harris's mind, he's probably like, I'll entertain the D.C. side just because of what they're doing with the Senate bill. Maybe I can use that to influence these other areas on even kicking a little more money, doing this or whatever else. and using the RFK site as leverage to get what you want over here, because you want the retractable dome. You want to be able to host a Super Bowl. You don't want to deal with the logistics of the security and all that other stuff anyway. I think ultimately, I think it doesn't get back in the RFK. And I know you guys talked about that before, and I kind of agree with that, especially with this conversation here now, too. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not dumb. He's going to play these locations off of one each other, of course.
And
that makes
people are
sense.
willing to be in the conversation again, which is the big thing now.
Yeah. One of you guys sent this out. That
was Alex.
Okay, yeah. Alex found a tweet from, or what do we call these now? A post from Dan Steinberg.
I still call them tweets. I still call Twitter. I'm always going to do that. Not
whatever
changing.
It is. Elon Musk's plaything.
Yeah.
He says an increasing share of DC residents. This, by the way, was from May 22nd at almost noon.
The Post did a poll. And they've done this poll before. So, yeah.
It says an increasing share of DC residents support using city funds to help finance a new football stadium. 2022, 30% were in favor and 67% opposed. This year, it's 47% in favor and 46% opposed. You can chalk me up to opposed, period, dot, the end, no matter what it is, no matter who it is. The purpose of, listen to me carefully, the purpose of public financing should be for the betterment of the city. And to the betterment of like people in need, to assist communities. It should not be to build a football stadium for a billionaire. That is just contrary to everything, to me, that is fundamental about usage and proper usage of public funds.
Yes. I mean, look, we've always agreed on that, Steve. But the thing I do find fascinating with this poll is that jump in the post-Snyder era of about a 20-point swing. Because it is about 20 points it's 20 points in terms of the opposition dropped. And then, what is that, 17% increase in favor after Dan Snyder sells the team. So I found that interesting. Now, here's the other thing that was in that poll. It wasn't in that tweet. They did also poll, are people in favor of it being in DC, just in general, not the financing stuff. At that point, in the whole region, it's only 50%, 51% want the stadium in the city, which I found that surprisingly low overall, regionally. In DC itself, it's 76% want it.
Wouldn't it be like the residents of Virginia more or less want it in Virginia and et cetera? I mean, that's how I think it would break out.
You would, but DC is not 50% of the regional population, so definitely there's a segment.
It's not. I don't know what percentage is it?
Well, so DC is just under 1 million. Virginia, I think, is now 4 million, depending on what you want to count as Northern Virginia, and Maryland's probably 2. I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
it's about that.
Well, maybe there's the history of RFK and everything that's involved.
I think the history of RFK, but also Virginia is famously more NIMBY-ish than any other area.
Virginia. There's a lot more room in Virginia than there are. NIMBY is not in my backyard, but there's a lot of space in Virginia. So I mean, I think they would encounter less NIMBY problems.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of space in Maryland too, if you know where to look, but
not as much though.
Not as much. Yeah, it's more developed.
And the other thing is, like, how does everybody realize how much it's going to cost? I mean, states do this; they'll issue bonds. They'll raise taxes on like hotels and rental cars because you can get some travelers and not the locals in it. DC is already paying for Nats Park.
Right. DC actually can't take out any more money right now.
That's a construction loan.
Mm-hmm.
For those, that was I think it was $350 million. Don't quote me on the number. That's
the whole cost was $600. I don't know what the loan was.
I think the loan was $350 million. Then that's the number that's in my head. And you're talking. Realistically, I mean, even on the cheap, it'd be 1.5 billion, maybe. On the cheap, it would be. And so you're talking about.
Now, are you talking about with a roof or without a roof?
Without a roof.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about a $1 billion loan or more. Or some combination of that, and because there's not enough tax revenue in the district to raise that. So then you're talking about bonds. You have to sell the bonds. I mean, it's a lot for a local government. States and big cities can do this. DC is not that big.
Now, so here's some of the updates on that. Just listening to local media who have been covering it pretty extensively. One minor thing: they are apparently paying off the loan early on Nats Park, which is wild. They've like
Where'd they
the
get the
way
money for that?
Well, the way they do their financing of all these is they just basically say, all right, if you're within a zone around the park, you pay an extra tax on your corporate taxes or your commercial real estate taxes, and that's adding, or they're using that to pay it down quicker. So they've kind of got this weird economic model, or I don't even know if it's that weird. I'm sure most regions use this economic model now of increasing taxes on restaurants and stuff like that in the area to.
It's usually hotels and rental cars, is what it is.
Well, they do more than that. They
do, but it's the first thing to go is always the.
Oh, sure, sure. I stayed in a hotel in New York, and even in New York, they have to pay a stadium tax fee.
Oh yeah, of course.
On Giant Stadium, which is in New Jersey, which is very
just think the financing is much more likely in Maryland or Virginia. And the other thing is the federal government still has oversight over what DC does.
That's a big thing.
And would the federal government allow a $1 billion, more than $1 billion of financing, particularly if the federal government, and we don't know what's going to happen in the election, but the House is Republican right now, and I'm not trying to get political, but they're more fiscally conservative, than Democrats typically.
They were. I don't know if they.
None of them are fiscally conservative now, but that's the history of it. And so and also, I mean, they would be opposed to. I mean, DC is one of the most democratic, probably is the most democratic city in the country. And so they would be opposed automatically from an ideological standpoint to the city government. So I just think it's very unlikely.
They oppose. There is a segment of the House that just does things just to try and mess up DC on purpose now at this point, to try and make things worse here. Like, that's a whole thing.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of politics, but the point is, I think it's the congressional oversight is a problem for those who are rooting for that, and the fact that the government projects currently to become more Republican hurts from the perspective of being more opposed to the very liberal DC government. That's what I'm saying.
And I mean, now there were even things in that bill that said no federal funds can be spent on this flat out. Right. So, and I think
that also doesn't need to be said anyway, because they'd have to appropriate money in the first place,
which they're never going to do.
Right.
Although I don't know if RFK was funded federally at all.
That you're talking about 60, 70 years ago. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, the 1960s. It was a great time. They had money for everything.
That's before the federal government started printing. It was $30 trillion in debt.
Oh, they were still massively in debt, just by different standards.
Not $34 trillion.
No. It was a good time.
So Maryland and Virginia both have a lot more access to funds, especially Virginia. Yeah. Virginia's not paying for a stadium currently. I mean, Maryland has got what's the Ravens place?
Yeah,
M&T. Is that what
is it? Still M&T? I don't even know. It was M&T Bank for a long time.
I don't know, but whatever that play. I mean, point is they still have that one way or the other on the books. Virginia doesn't. So I think Virginia has more room. Virginia makes more sense to me.
The problem is Virginia is even more of a cluster F politically right now. There's a lot more infighting going on, which is causing more gridlock at the state level than any other of these three regions. Maryland, though, I don't think Maryland's split right now. I think it's a Democrat House and Senate.
Because Larry Hogan's not in office anymore.
No, it's a Democrat governor, and what's more, the governor is very pro keeping the stadium. Hogan was too, to an extent, but he didn't want to work with Snyder. Who can blame him?
Nobody wants to work with Snyder.
Right. But these were some interesting things. I thought those polls were interesting just because they showed such a momentum shift. That's pretty rare to see that much of a shift just because one tiny tyrant, disappeared.
I don't think it was just that though. I think it was the hubbub about RFK. Yeah, they didn't say when the poll was taken. And that RFK news about the bill in the House has been out for what, a couple months now?
About a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was a month ago or so that the House passed the bill.
Certainly
so maybe
the
people
tiny
are like,
tyrant.
it's feasible. I get you.
Certainly the tiny tyrant mattered, though.
I'm going to call it the tiny tyrant bump. The tiny tyrant bump is when things become 20% better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing when you remove the parasite how much the area kind of recovers.
Yes, it really is. So speaking of the tiny tyrant, we got to talk about that story. We didn't want to talk about Snyder, but he did something so funny. This is going to get a little political again, folks, so just bear with us all. Dan Snyder has decided to dip his toes in Hollywood again, and he put some backing into this movie, The Apprentice, which is about the early years of Donald Trump in the 80s. Dan Snyder is apparently the only person who would fund a movie without reading a script or even a treatment of this movie, because this movie is not flattering about Donald Trump.
Can we think about this for a moment? Okay, and I'm not telling anybody what to think,
right.
Fine, and we're not political on the show, but Hollywood is very, very, very liberal.
Sure.
Hollywood is one of the most left-leaning groups of people in the country, safe to say. And Hollywood is never going to make a movie that is flattering to Donald Trump, who is despised like more than any other politician. And so then you have the tiny tyrant roll in there, and what does he think they're going to do?
Right.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
This was an independent film company. It's a smaller thing.
It's still Hollywood, though.
I know.
mean, he needs to be smarter than that.
Steve, he's a college dropout. He's not going to be smarter than this.
I mean, what? But like, okay, so he's a Trump supporter, apparently. So we've read.
Does he really? Well, he's always been a Republican.
Yeah. Like, does he really think that some group of Hollywood people are going to make a movie that's flattering to Donald Trump? Where'd that come from?
Yeah. I think maybe he was hoping these were a bunch of Trump loyalists who were just doing something.
There aren't any Trump loyalists in Hollywood.
Well, but these aren't Hollywood. Again, these are not Hollywood guys.
They have Hollywood actors involved. Hollywood is agents. True. Hollywood's involved. It's not like a Bollywood movie,
Well, come on. They have a certain code of ethics that they follow. They're very honest in their.
You can't even say that with a straight face, man. You try.
No,
it's pretty amazing. Just watching how. It's just watching from the outside. I don't know a whole great deal about everything what you talk about with Dan Snyder. I only just recently heard about it, actually. But it's like, just anybody with any ounce of, just one brain cell at least firing up in your head will realize that going into something like this, you're not going to get the outcome that you desired because of the ideology, one, that he follows, and two, you're dealing with, like you said, Steve, Hollywood, for crying out loud. You're talking about a bunch of people.
If he'd wanted something like what it sounds he wanted, he should have gone to Kirk Cameron or somebody like that.
Yeah,
right.
Go to Kevin Sorbo. He's not working. He can play Donald Trump. There you go. That would have given Dan what he wanted. The most unrealistic Donald Trump character in the history of Hollywood.
Yeah, I don't think Kirk Cameron really fills into the Donald Trump mold.
In terms of an actor, no. But nor does Kevin Sorbo anymore.
No,
he's like 100 years old.
And to be fair, the producer of this Apprentice movie is an Indian guy, I think, meaning from India. I think he is, or maybe he's Afghani or Iranian, or he's not American.
I have to look up his name.
Yeah, he's not American. I'm getting his nationality wrong, but whatever it is, he's not American. So maybe Snyder thought that, but you're a moron if you think that Hollywood's ever going to produce a movie flattering to Donald Trump, period.
Yeah, all right. It's Ali Abbasi is the guy's name. He's from Iran.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So somehow I don't think an Iranian anybody is. It's funny. Vote how you want, think how you want. We're football, but it's funny.
Look, I went to film school, right? We all know this. Probably my worst class was the business of filmmaking. That's probably the only one
That'd
I
be
got
the
a
only
C.
one I would do well in.
Yeah, but the first thing you learn is to read the scripts, read the treatments, understand what you're putting your money into before you put your money into. Because here's the thing, when you put your money in, you don't really get a vote after that, as much as people think.
Maybe Dan Snyder was so busy running his football team that,
But this was
he
all
didn't have time.
this was all done post football team.
I'm joking, Alex.
Yeah.
Keep up.
Yeah, but
He
we're
didn't have
also
any-
assuming that the guy can read too.
That's
I mean,
true. Yeah.
when it gets beyond 4 letters, he probably struggles.
Maybe he was too busy floating around on his yacht in the Mediterranean to actually read the script.
Yeah, yeah. But it's just hilarious how dumb he is. How do so many stupid people get so rich, Steve? That's the great mystery of the world.
Because he convinced Howard Milstein to fund him, 35 years ago?
Yeah.
That's why. And never forget what he did. He was basically spamming people.
Yep.
That's what that company was doing.
Telemarketing con.
Yes.
Yep.
No wonder he liked Donald Trump so much.
Donald Trump wasn't a telemarketer.
No,
Say
but
what you want about Trump, but I mean, he started as a legitimate real estate developer.
he did with his dad's money. But that's besides the point.
Yeah, but he made a lot of money. But he
did
made
make
a
a lot
ton
of
of
money.
money. He made a ton of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was smart. He invested in New York City when it was the 80s and everything was cheap in a slum, and then it got nice.
Again, I'm not I'm not a big Donald Trump fan either, okay? But I mean, he was a legit real estate developer and legitimately made a lot of money. That is totally different than what Dan Snyder did. Dan Snyder was literally a creepy telemarketer.
Yes. Although he did do that weird what was it, like college private flight, like he would rent out private planes for college kids.
Oh, that was a chump change thing. That was when he was like,
Yeah.
20 or something. That's not how he made his real
Well,
money.
it's not how he made his millions, but he made
No.
enough money there where he's like, I'm quitting college, which is ridiculous. But
Yeah.
And so next on the NPR news.
Oh yeah, we're the hog side. I forgot.
so this makes 2 movies Dan Snyder's funded, by the way, that have just become complete boondoggles for him.
The other one was Valkyrie, right?
Right, with Tom Cruise.
That wasn't a total boondoggle. I mean, it wasn't a success, but it wasn't like a.
It was a
total
financial boondoggle because they kept on like having to pour more money into it. That was the real thing.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. They kept on running into complications, and
then the movie didn't do very well in the theater.
and
I remember.
it definitely never made its money back.
Yeah.
And then remember he was hanging out with Tom Cruise, and then Tom Cruise would not be seen with him.
I think Tom Cruise is the only one that didn't look tall compared to Dan Snyder.
Yeah, no, if they stood next to each other, they looked the same height.
Roughly.
Yeah.
I don't think
And if
either
Dave
one of them
stood
are.
next to him, he would, be able to dunk on him.
Well, I don't know. Dave's 4'10", so.
Yeah.
I
think
definitely got height on Snyder.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely got height on him. Absolutely.
In terms of strength of character, yes. I don't know about height.
Well, come on, Steve. That's not saying much. Oh man.
Yeah. It was just hilarious though.
I don't think either one of them are telling the truth about their height. I don't think either Dan Snyder or Tom Cruise would tell you the truth about how tall they are.
No. Well,
Doesn't Tom Cruise have like those real thick soles in his shoes, right?
He does.
Yeah, but I bet you Snyder
Yes.
did the same thing. He's
Mhm.
arrogant, arrogant snot too.
Yeah. Well, remember that one time? Well, you know what? We're not going to get into it. We're not going to I'm not going down the rabbit hole of all the time Dan Snyder lied about his height.
Stay
Yeah.
on topic. Stay on topic.
Stay on topic. All right, let's do position group breakdowns because
Okay.
that's the next topic we got here. We're doing defensive tackles this week. Dave wrote this one up.
No. No one from Tampa wrote this.
Oh, no one from Tampa is
Yeah.
writing this one up. Okay. All right. So no one wrote this one up yet.
Literally no one. Yes. Okay.
All right,
So you want me to go over this?
Yeah. You want to run through the list?
Sure. Okay. So, first of all, the idea behind this position group breakdown thing, for those of you who haven't been around, is after we get through free agency, after we get through the draft, then we're going to take a look at one position group a week between the draft and when free agency starts or when training camp starts, rather, to just examine what Washington has now that they put the team together. That's the idea behind it. And, we need hashtag content. So this week we have defensive tackles. So the returning players, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, John Ridgeway, Phil Mathis, and Benning Potato. This is what I call him, which is Benning Potoe, I think. I'm gonna mess his name up. So let's start with the starters here and see what you guys think. Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, two of the most highly paid players on the team. They both had, safe to say, negative seasons last year by their standards. What do we think about Allen and Payne?
I mean, overall, they're still, even though they had down seasons, I still am optimistic that that's going to be more of a fluke, that these are two very good defensive tackles, borderline Pro Bowlers every year. The only reason I don't think you can mark them both in as Pro Bowlers every year is I think there's just a glut of good defensive tackles in the league at this point. Although I guess it did just get a little thinner, that list of great defensive tackles right now. But these guys have been solid. I don't worry about them necessarily. I think when you look at the problems the defense had, they're probably trying to do too much because the guys around them, they didn't have a good supporting cast.
Yeah, I just think the utilization of these two guys under what Del Rio was doing just wasn't very good. The supporting cast of linebackers was easily the worst in the league. When the secondary can't cover anybody coming off the line, I mean, it neutralizes what they can do. Quinn revamped the defense quite a bit in the front two levels. I get that. Secondary still kind of shaky in many aspects, well, in all aspects really. But it's I think Quinn's going to get the most out of these guys, especially now with him having Wagner and Lavu as linebackers. I think you're going to see what you saw a couple years ago kind of come back in that middle of that defense with those two.
I mean, my concern was that Jonathan Allen showed a bit of a bad attitude last year.
Yes, he did. Yes.
And then toward the end of in the early off season, I think he said something about not wanting to be a part of a rebuild. Mm-hmm. So my question automatically for him would be, he's here, whether he wants to be or not, he's part of a rebuild. So is his attitude going to improve and get back to what it was when he was, he set the example for the team? And newsflash, he's still setting an example for a team. It just needs to be a good example, not a bad example. So that's my concern about Allen. And Payne,
that's understandable.
And Payne, it's health. He's been hurt before. In some ways, I think Payne may be a more dynamic player than Jonathan Allen in some respects, but he needs to stay healthy. Okay, so those are the starters. Of the holdovers from last year, Ridgeway, Phil Mathis, Benning Potato. Yeah. We're insulting some, Pacific Islanders, here. Apologies.
Potoa.
That's good.
Potatoes more fun.
Yeah. BP. We'll just call him BP.
BP. There you go. John Ridgeway at times looked like he had potential last year.
Oh, absolutely. John Ridgeway, I was down on him at first just because he made so many mental mistakes that when he first came on board here, but he's played well in a relief role. Let's be honest. It's not like, I don't know if you could ever see him really being a full-time starter.
No.
But as a third defensive tackle, he's as good as any you'd ever ask for in the league.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right. And Phil Mathis is a total waste, obviously. I mean, he didn't play, last year. He got hurt.
Yep. He's always hurt.
Yeah, but he's safe to say, thus far at least, bust. And Benning Potato, we never saw him. So the new player, I think
he played 20-something snaps last year.
Something like that. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, that's not to say he couldn't prove himself, but who knows? And the new players, Johnny Newton, which in my view is a complete waste of a draft pick. Certainly the worst pick Washington made. I'm gonna totally bust this guy's name. Haggai Dubuisi, I think. Ndubuisi, and that is an African name, and I don't mean to butcher it, but I probably did, because I think the N is silent in most of those. Anyway, he's an international pathway program person, which is why I mentioned him, and so he is basically a free roster spot. So that who knows if he can play or not, but he's a free roster spot, so they'll keep him. But Johnny Newton is, of course, hurt and will be out half the season. He's probably going to be on the PUP list because of a foot injury. And so not only did they not need to draft him, but now he's not going to play for 8 games.
So there is a little update on that I heard on the radio, and that is that with the other foot, when he injured it, it took him about 3 months to heal. So if it's the same timeline, he'll be there probably at the start of the season.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's not to say he should be on this team, but
no. I'm just putting that out there. He's not.
And I know, like, no one from Tampa has. We should have got him on. It's my fault, but his view of it was that Newton is a good pick because they're going to cut Mathis and Newton becomes the backup. But my view of it is, look, a second-round pick needs to be a starter, and you've got 2 very highly paid guys as your starters. So I don't know why you draft a guy like this.
So basically, I mean, you're having Newton just being what Mathis was a couple of years ago, and I agree with you. I mean, even though the tackles at that point of that draft weren't exactly the guys that you wanted at that point of the draft, because it would have been a bit of a reach to go with like Ainsley or Paul at that time. So you could have gone corner. You could have gone even another wide receiver at that point if you really wanted to.
Guard, right tackle,
anything.
Yeah.
Or even you could have dropped, or even you could have found a trade partner, because there were teams trying to move up to that point of the draft throughout the entire process. You could have moved back, and you could have gotten whatever you want. It's Newton. Newton was
a ridiculous pick.
Yes, although I do love the talent, and I think the talent is much better than what Mathis was. I'll give you that, which is true. I'm not going to take that away from him. But for what this team needed, what was available, and what you should have gone with, and like you said, Steve, should have a starter at that, and that have a second pick. He just wasn't the best pick in that point.
I mean, so there is a lot of talk that Jonathan Allen probably will be gone after this year, and this is the replacement. I'm still, they did this with Mathis when they brought him in. Well, Deron Payne's going to be gone. This is his replacement, right? Like, we've seen that game before. It doesn't always work out. Drafting a guy to eventually be the replacement is not cut and dry. It just isn't. So, I don't know. We'll see what Newton does.
You got to have a more immediate need to spend a second-round pick on somebody.
I think so, too. Also, I think at that high of a second-round pick, you need defensive tackles, but it's not an impact position a lot of times.
That's right.
Right. It's kind of like the whole argument about guards. Guards are important, but how many guards really are impact players? They just, that inside space, it doesn't get that.
I guess. Now, Washington has a truckload of defensive linemen right now, but most of these guys are not interior defensive tackles. So we'll get to the rest of them another day. That really and truly, of the dedicated, these people will be defensive tackles. That's really about it. Those guys that we named.
Yeah. Well, and even our favorite named BP there, because I started writing my thing on defensive ends. He's kind of listed as a defensive end last year, which is wild because he's, a big dude. But, even someone like him plays both spots.
Yeah, I don't know how effective he would be.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any others we got to cover here?
No, that's it, kids. That is the entirety of really defensive tackle group. Right. It really, I gotta, to not give up on Newton. It was really the first time I've been disappointed with what this ownership group has done. And I think the proper draft approach, in my view, and I think Alex, you agree. I think you agree, Dave. But you have to factor need into it at some level. We're not saying pass up a Hall of Famer for a bum, but you have to factor need in at some level if you're going to effectively build a roster. I think, guess what? You can have too many pass rushers. You know, you can't have too many running backs. I mean, and you have to kind of balance. And I just think Newton was not a balanced pick. How about that?
No,
I just think when you build a draft board, obviously need and best player available was plays in the play, but it's like you have to have that balance. But sometimes you have that one guy who doesn't fit your need, slides in the draft, and he's a guy that could be a game changer, a guy that could develop into something, even though you might be loaded at that position, and that's a guy that you want to take that consideration to make that move on. But but in my opinion, guys like that, when you consider drafting them, are edge rushers, or guys that like maybe your running backs, or guys that actually affect the game, that can sit there and change the momentum of the game at a drop of a dime, and defensive tackle isn't it. They don't affect the game. I mean, unless he's Aaron Donald.
Right.
I mean, outside of that, I mean, you're not getting a defensive tackle who's going to have that kind of a change or affect the game in that way. So yeah, it's definitely best player available, and it's also need. You balance out your need, what your top needs. You look see who's best available, see how they slot together in there, and then you kind of go, well, my need is here, but my best player available isn't quite there. But if I go to that next group down, that now balances that out. Well, let's go to that group here, that second tier group, or that second group on our need, because the player there is much more valuable, but he's still a guy of need to do at the same time. Yeah, I agree with that premise wholeheartedly.
I think the bigger issue with this group is technically speaking, we don't really know what defense they're running. We're saying this under the assumption that they're going to run a 4-3, which would mean, so I guess didn't do that. I mean, the starters, obviously Payne and Allen, there's no question.
Right.
And so the backup has to be right now Phil Mathis, depending on whether Newton could be the principal backup, could be healthy or not, and maybe he will be. And then some combination of Benning Potato and the other guy with the weird name.
Well, I wouldn't count out Ridgeway. I honestly think
Ridgeway. Yeah, true. You're right. That's so I think Potato and the other guy probably are headed to the practice squad. I forgot about Rigby or Ridgeway.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement. It's a question of, are you going to try and keep 5 or 4? 5 is pretty rare at defensive tackle, honestly.
Don't you have to keep 5 because you drafted 2? You spent 2 second-round picks on people you didn't need.
Yeah, I mean that's where it gets tricky. My thing is, well, I think they will run a 4-3 predominantly. Dan Quinn is a 4-3 under guy. Like, that's his thing. More so than the cover 3 that they used to do in Seattle. The one thing he's stuck with is that he loves playing that 4-3 under, which means, your strong side linebacker is really your edge rusher on one side. So when you're playing that, it's not unusual to use 3 defensive tackles. So I think you'll see a lot of that this year.
That's a good observation.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a lot about it when I started writing my defensive end stuff. So, that's
well, also, they don't really have 2 starting quality defensive ends.
No, not really.
They could throw 2 dudes out there, but.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When we get into that, it's a lot. So I did want to touch on a couple NFL stories before we wrap up today. Rashee Rice, Dave brought this to us. Apparently, he ran into some legal issues in Dallas. The charges are getting dropped, but it looks like he got in a fight out there now with somebody.
With a photographer, I believe it was.
Yeah, dude, you're just gonna be Antonio Brown. Just congratulations.
There's not a lot of people who are bigger lunatics than Antonio Brown. I don't think he's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is a legitimate, like he legitimately has mental health issues.
Yeah, he's a category into himself.
Rashee Rice is just kind of a crappy person. There's a difference.
Okay.
Because don't forget, Rashee Rice was the guy who a month ago got in trouble because he was racing on a freeway in Dallas and caused an accident and literally walked away from yeah. And so this thing is he got in a fight with a photographer. The photographer dropped the charges saying it was a misunderstanding.
Right.
Who knows why he dropped? Maybe I don't even want to speculate. Who knows?
Yeah.
But this certainly doesn't do anything to bolster Rashee Rice's sterling reputation.
Okay, so he's Albert Hainsworth, but as a receiver.
There you go.
That's who he is. Super talented guy, terrible. Just making terrible decisions all the time. The other two little things, the NFL is really going to start pushing hard for 18 games. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise any of us, I think. It sounds like that's going to be the one thing Roger Goodell wants to get done before he officially retires. And then they announced the 2026 draft will be held in Pittsburgh.
Why?
Why? Yeah. Well, the year before they're doing Green Bay. So maybe they just really want to go like Great Lakes, get all the Great Lakes states out of the way, or Great Lake cities.
To the two places that possibly the worst places you could think of to have a draft in the entire NFL country.
I could think of plenty of worse places.
And
in terms of NFL teams,
that are NFL teams, you couldn't.
Yeah, Indianapolis, worse.
Indianapolis is used to it. Indianapolis has hosted the combine for years.
That's true.
They've had the Final Four.
The Speedway, it'd be fun.
They've had the Final Four. They have the Indy 500.
It's just a boring town. That's all.
But they're used to entertaining people, though.
Cleveland, awful.
I would pick Cleveland over Green Bay.
I think Green Bay at least has the history, but it's not really a city. I understand why you're saying.
Cleveland has got the Rock and Roll Museum. Yeah, there's a city. There's things to do there.
I would say Detroit's worse.
There's not a lot worse than Detroit.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have it down on 8 Mile.
As much as I love the city of Buffalo should never host it. I don't think they could handle it.
That's a tough one. That one's down there. I'd have to think about that one. That's tough.
But they have the Wings, and I do love the Wings.
And they got the Mafia.
Yeah. Every town thinks their Wings are the best.
Well,
literally every city.
Them.
Well, no, because Philadelphia doesn't have very good wings.
But is the fact that you invented wings, is that enough to carry the day, though?
No, of course not. No one's saying it's enough to carry the day.
They're just going to serve millions of wings.
Yeah. Actually, that will be how they bring out each player on a float of wings.
So, and listen, even Detroit has some entertainment. If you can avoid getting shot, there are some things to do in Detroit, and it is a major city. So I would put Detroit over at least Green Bay.
Green Bay is just a tough one, just because it is I think the population is 50,000.
Yeah, and if you've never been there, it is not necessarily right near Milwaukee.
No, it's a couple hours north of Milwaukee.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
But I get it. It's also the most historic team, arguably. So they need
I get why they have it, but I mean, it's not. It's not Atlanta or Nashville.
No. No. Even Jacksonville would be a better place to host it. And everyone makes fun of Jacksonville's existence.
It's still Florida and the beach. You can't go
wrong
with
that. Exactly. You could do something with that.
Yeah.
Put it all on a boat.
Town, that's all.
The circus? Barnum and Bailey went out of business.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could find enough sideshow freaks to bring in there and then create something, something, whatever.
You probably.
I'll volunteer. I'll be the little guy, the bearded little guy or something like that.
I think you'd be even at your height at 4'10", you would be taller than people they need, though.
Actually,
I don't have great I don't have great posture, so it makes it seem even smaller. So
Dave, obviously Philly hosted a draft one year. Did you go for that?
Me and my brothers and friends of ours were planning on going. We went to, and the last minute we had a few changes. People weren't able to go, and then I was just like, well,
no good.
Maybe we'll do day 2, and it just didn't materialize. And I regret that. I was like, I should just went myself instead of worrying about going with the whole group. I should have just went with myself. Dragged my wife out there and just had a good time, and then boom. But whatever. It'll be
Baltimore
back
would be awful. Eventually. I just thought of that. Baltimore would be awful.
But Baltimore is near enough to DC. You could get, there's enough entertainment. Granted, you don't want to stay in where The Wire was filmed to have a giant street party. But I mean, you're near enough to DC that you can make some fun of it.
You would just do it at the harbor, and no one would leave the harbor.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Carolina would be pretty dull.
Charlotte is not as dull as you might think.
It's small though. They don't have a lot there though, do they?
They have a downtown.
They do have a downtown.
Yeah, it would be better than Green Bay. I mean, we're not setting the bar
better than Green
high.
Bay. I get that, but
yeah. So. Also, I just realized, isn't the draft still technically wintertime?
Well, I mean, April. It certainly won't be warm in northern Wisconsin. No.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, probably no snow, but it won't be warm.
I mean, Dave, you tell us what Pittsburgh will be like in late April.
Well, Pittsburgh is actually going to probably be pretty chilly up there, especially being right off the river and stuff out there. It's around this time of year. You're probably your highs at that time is probably in like the low 50s, high 40s.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be pretty chilly.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah,
I would pass.
It's not going to be record. Safe to say there will not be record-breaking crowds.
No.
Although
those Pittsburgh people are crazy, so they might do it. So those are the only other NFL stories. And
although to be fair, wasn't the draft in Detroit this year?
Yeah, and they set the record.
Yeah,
Well, actually, being Pittsburgh right there, you're going to get people from Cleveland, from people from Cincinnati. I mean, you got a lot of rabid fans in that area. It's going to fill out. I mean, you're going to get people from Philadelphia who's going to go out there. I guarantee you that.
Oh,
so
sure.
You're going to get a lot of people who's going to show up. There's no doubt in my mind about that with Pittsburgh.
It's actually in terms of like NFL team locations, Pittsburgh's pretty central to a lot of teams.
Yeah.
It does have that advantage. So. Yeah. All right. I think that should wrap up this show. Right?
I believe so.
All right, guys. We did it. Next week, what are we covering next week?
Edge rushers.
Okay, so I got to finish my article.
Yes.
All right. I'll have it done. Okay, guys. We will talk to you all then.
Your job's on the line, Alex.
Enjoy the long weekend, everybody.
All right, later, guys.
Bye.